Standard barbell deadlifts are quietly destroying your lower back, and the fitness industry has been lying to your face about it for 30 years. I know that is a bold statement. I know some of you are already reaching for the comment section, but stay with me, because by the time we are done today, you are going to look at that loaded barbell on the gym floor and see it for exactly what it is: a beautifully marketed, biomechanically flawed tool that was never designed for the human body you actually live in. My name is Dr. Aris Thorne, and on Primal Unleashed, we operate by one standard, the Silverback Standard. We do not chase trends. We do not follow the crowd. We go back to what the body was actually built to do, because modern life makes us soft, and primal movement makes us unbreakable. We do not just lift weight. We reclaim our nature. So if you have been grinding away at conventional deadlifts, waking up Monday morning with that deep grinding stiffness in your lower back, feeling like your strength has hit a ceiling you cannot break through, no matter how much more you load the bar, this conversation is for you, and what I'm about to show you is going to change everything. Stay until the end, because I'm walking you through the exact technique, the exact 4 cues, and the 12-week protocol that will transition you completely from a fragile, rigid lifter to someone moving with raw, primal, explosive power. Everything changes at the end, so do not go anywhere. The cost of your conventional deadlift obsession. Let me paint you a picture. It's 2026. Sports medicine clinics are reporting what they're quietly calling a silent epidemic. Lower back herniations in recreational lifters between the ages of 25 and 44 have surged by nearly 34% in the last 6 years. Not in elite powerlifters pushing 700-pound world records, in everyday people. People who go to the gym 3-4 times a week. People who are trying to get stronger, live longer, and move better. And when you dig into the data, when you sit down with the physical therapists and orthopedic specialists who are treating these people, a pattern emerges with uncomfortable clarity. The overwhelming majority of these injuries trace directly back to one movement pattern: the conventional barbell deadlift, performed with a fixed straight bar. Now here's where it gets personal for a lot of you, because I'm not describing some fringe group of reckless gym beginners who ignored all the rules. I'm describing careful, dedicated, form-conscious lifters who did everything the YouTube tutorial told them to do. Hinge at the hips, keep the bar close, drive through the floor, pack the shoulders, neutral spine. They followed every cue, and they still got hurt. Why? Because the cues were never wrong. The bar was. Think about Monday morning, that specific, deeply familiar stiffness that greets you after a heavy Friday session. That's not soreness from growth. That's your body telling you it spent the entire weekend trying to repair microstress along your lumbar facets and sacroiliac joint. That's your nervous system running damage control. And if you've ever noticed that this Monday morning stiffness seems slightly worse over the months, not better, that's not bad luck. That's a cumulative pattern trying to get your attention. Here's what nobody in the conventional fitness world wants to say out loud. Your barbell obsession is not building functional strength. It's building a very specific, very narrow strength pattern that has almost zero carryover to how your body actually needs to perform in the real world. Think about it. When do you ever, in an athletic context, in daily movement, in sport, in nature, pull a heavy object from a position where your feet are exactly hip-width apart, your spine is perfectly vertical, and a rigid steel bar locks your hands into a completely symmetrical, fixed grip? The answer is almost never. What you're building on that barbell platform is not functional power. It's a performance optimized for one specific moment under artificial, perfectly calibrated conditions. And the price you're paying for that performance is the slow, grinding erosion of the exact joints and tissues you need to stay active, pain-free, and explosive for the next 40 years of your life. That's the trap. That's the biomechanical prison the conventional industry built for you. And today, we're walking out of it. Why the barbell is breaking your longevity. To understand why the Gorilla Deadlift outperforms the barbell, you first have to understand what the barbell is physically doing to your spine during a conventional pull. And it's something that most coaches never explain, because frankly, most coaches don't fully understand it themselves.
When you position your body to pull a fixed straight bar from the floor, you're forced into a very specific geometric relationship to that bar. Your hands are locked in a perfectly symmetrical shoulder width or wider grip along a straight horizontal axis. That sounds fine in theory, but here's the physics reality. A straight bar forces your center of gravity to sit slightly forward of where your body naturally wants to hinge. To compensate and to keep the bar close to your body as it rises, which every reputable coach correctly tells you to do, your lumbar spine is subjected to what biomechanists call lateral shear force. This is not compression, which the spine handles fairly well. This is a shearing force, a force that acts across the disc material rather than through it. And the human lumbar spine was simply not engineered to resist repeated lateral shear force under heavy load. Over time, over hundreds of sessions, over thousands of repetitions, this shear force slowly degrades the posterior fibers of your intervertebral discs, not dramatically, not catastrophically at first, just gradually, progressively, until one day you load the bar a little heavier than usual, or you're slightly more fatigued than you realized, and a disc that has been silently compromised for 18 months finally gives way. That's the injury story that almost every one of those 34% increase statistics represents. Not a single catastrophic mistake, a slow, accumulated mechanical insult that the industry never told you was happening. Now here's the second failure of the conventional barbell approach that rarely gets discussed: the complete absence of real-world functional carryover. You put in the work, you show up consistently, your barbell deadlift goes up, and then you go play recreational basketball on Saturday, or you sprint after your dog in the park, or you carry a heavy, awkward load up a flight of stairs, and you discover that all that barbell strength somehow didn't prepare you for any of it. You feel stiff, uncoordinated, almost disconnected from the movement. That's not a fitness problem. That's a specificity problem. The barbell trained a very narrow, symmetrical, artificially stabilized movement pattern. Real life moves in multiple planes. Real life requires rotational stability, variable grip positions, asymmetric loading, and the ability to generate explosive force from a wide, grounded, unpredictable base.
Which brings us to a movement that your body has actually been designed to perform since long before dumbbells were invented. A movement pattern so deeply encoded in your primate physiology that it is written into your musculoskeletal architecture itself. The Gorilla Deadlift, the primal solution to chronic lifting pain. The Gorilla Deadlift is not a novelty. It is not a fitness gimmick. It is not some Instagram trend that will disappear in 6 months. It is a rediscovery. A deliberate return to the movement mechanics that your body has been executing variations of for hundreds of thousands of years. Here is the fundamental insight that separates primal movement from conventional gym culture. Gorillas, and by direct anatomical extension, humans, are built to hinge, squat, and pull from a wide, grounded, hip-dominant stance with externally rotated hips and a natural forward lean in the torso. That is not a coaching preference. That is primate physiology. That is what your glutes, hamstrings, adductors, and posterior chain are actually shaped and oriented to produce maximum force through. When you perform a gorilla deadlift, here is what changes biomechanically, and this is where it gets genuinely exciting. Your feet are positioned significantly wider than shoulder width, closer to what you might recognize as a sumo stance, but with an important distinction. Your toes are flared out a natural 30 to 45 degree angle, which opens the hip joint and allows full, unrestricted range of motion through the glutes and hip external rotators. You are not fighting your anatomy. You are working with it. Your grip, and this is the detail that most people miss, is a staggered, knuckle-forward position that naturally pulls your shoulders into external rotation, braces the lats, and critically positions the load slightly behind your center of gravity rather than in front of it. That single shift in load position eliminates the lateral shear force on the lumbar spine almost entirely. The load now travels through your spine in compressive force, which is the exact force your vertebrae are architecturally designed to handle. And then is the hinge itself. Because of the wider stance and the deeper hip angle, you achieve a range of motion through the hip crease that you simply cannot access on a conventional barbell pull. That deeper hinge means your glutes are loaded under a greater stretch. And here is the physiology that matters. A muscle loaded under greater stretch during the lowering phase generates dramatically more force during the lifting phase. This is the stretch shortening cycle at its most powerful. This is where explosive force actually comes from. The result is not just a safer lift, it is a more powerful lift, more glute activation, more hamstring fiber recruitment, more hip drive, more force at the floor, more speed through the pull, more carryover to every athletic movement you perform outside the gym. This is the Primal solution, not a compromise, not a modification, an upgrade. Why the Gorilla method outperforms the platform. Let me give you the numbers because this should not just be philosophy. This needs to be evidence. Research published in Applied Biomechanics and Sports Science journals in 2025 and 2026 has begun formally quantifying what primal movement practitioners have known through practice for years. When you compare EMG activation data, that is electromyography, the direct measurement of actual muscle fiber recruitment between a conventional barbell deadlift and a wide stance, hip-dominant gorilla-style pull using comparable loads, the findings are striking. Gluteus maximus fiber activation increases by an average of 22 to 28% in the gorilla stance compared to the conventional pull. Hamstring activation, particularly the biceps femoris, which is critical for explosive hip extension athletes actually need, shows increases of 18 to 24%. And, perhaps most significantly for long-term durability, measured lumbar erector spinae strain, the stress placed on the small stabilizing muscles along your spine that are responsible for most chronic lower back pain in lifters, decreases by over 35%. What does that mean in practice? It means your posterior chain, your actual engine for explosive power, is working harder and more efficiently, while the structures most vulnerable to injury are working significantly less. You are recruiting more of what you want and protecting more of what you need. And the recovery data is equally compelling. Athletes who transitioned to the gorilla-style pull protocol reported and showed measurable reductions in the time between sessions where the lower back and posterior chain felt genuinely ready to train again at full intensity. The average reduction across the available 2026 data sets sits at approximately 30%. That is not a small number. A 30% faster turnaround between sessions means more training blocks per training year. More quality sessions means more stimulus, more adaptation, more growth. The Gorilla method is not just safer, it compounds. Now, I want to address the performance skeptics, the competitive lifters, and the hybrid athletes who are thinking this sounds like rehab programming, not serious training. I understand that instinct. I held it myself for years. But consider this. The gorilla-style pull directly trains the exact hip extension pattern that produces acceleration in sprinting, power output in jumping, and drive through chain of direction movements in field sports. A conventional barbell deadlift does not. It builds a straight-line, bilateral, artificially stabilized force production that is impressive on a platform and largely irrelevant everywhere else. The Gorilla Pull builds real-world, multi-planar, primate-grade explosive power, the kind that doesn't stay in the gym, the kind that you actually feel in your body when you move through life. That's the Silverback Standard in action. We don't just lift weights, we reclaim our nature. All right, let's get practical, because knowing the theory without knowing the execution gets you nothing but an interesting conversation. Here are the 4 exact cues I teach inside the Primal Unleashed community. Cue 1, the wide primal stance. Set your feet at roughly 1.5 to 2 times shoulder width, toes angled out to 30 to 45 degrees. Before you touch anything, before you grip anything, push your knees out in the direction of your toes and feel the hip joints open. You should feel a gentle stretch in the inner thigh and a sense of the hips settling into the joint rather than being forced. That sensation of settling is your body telling you it recognizes this position. That's the primal base. Cue 2, the knuckle duster grip. Rather than a standard overhand or mixed barbell grip, the Gorilla Deadlift uses what I call the knuckle duster grip. Your hands positioned at roughly mid-shin level on a trap bar, kettlebell, or loaded carry implement, with the grip slightly angled so your knuckles face forward and slightly down. This naturally pulls your shoulders into external rotation, braces the latch, and critically positions the load at your center of gravity rather than in front of it.
The first time you feel this versus a straight bar, the difference is immediately obvious. Q3, the low center of gravity load. Before you initiate the pull, take a full diaphragmatic breath into your belly, not your chest. Brace your entire core, 360 degrees of pressure, as if you are about to absorb impact from every direction simultaneously. Now, hinge at the hips and lower yourself into the start position. Not a squat, a hinge. You want your hips higher than your knees, your chest tall, your gaze forward and slightly down. Feel the posterior chain, glutes, hamstrings, the entire backside of your body load under tension like a coiled spring. That tension is your power waiting to be released. Q4, the primal drive. Drive your feet through the floor, not just down, but out, spreading the floor like you are trying to push the walls of the gym apart with your feet. This cue activates the hip abductors and the deep glute complex in a way that simply pushing the floor down never achieves. As the load clears the floor, drive your hips forward with controlled explosiveness. You are not jerking, you are unleashing. At the top, lock everything, glutes, core, shoulders pulled back. Stand proud, hold for one breath. Lower under full control. That is the Gorilla Deadlift. And the first time you feel genuine hip drive in that lift, the first time your glutes fire the way they were actually built to, you will understand what I mean when I say this is a different animal entirely. Now, the technique alone is not enough. The transition from conventional barbell mechanics to primal-styled pulling requires a structured neurological and muscular adaptation process. This is what the 12-week Primal Pull Protocol is built to deliver. Weeks 1 through 3 are the recalibration phase, lower loads, higher frequency. You are not trying to hit new maxes. You are reprogramming your nervous system's motor patterns, teaching your body to trust the new geometry, the wide stance, the knuckle grip, the posterior chain activation sequence. 3 sessions per week focused entirely on clean execution and building the neurological foundation. Weeks 4 through 7 are the activation phase. We begin systematically loading the movement, progressing through a periodized scheme that builds posterior chain strength while the new movement pattern becomes automatic. By the end of week 7, most athletes report that the gorilla pull feels more natural than the barbell ever did. That is the neurological adaptation completing itself. Weeks 8 through 12 are the expression phase. This is where you chase performance, maximal effort sessions, explosive variations, single-leg gorilla hinges for unilateral stability, and loaded carry integration that takes the strength you have built and translates it directly into multiplanar, real-world athletic power. The full 12-week protocol with video demonstration of every cue, session-by-session programming, and access to the complete 2026 PrimalUnleash suite is available inside the membership community. The link is in the description. And if you want the foundational biomechanics of everything we covered today in a format you can take to the gym this week, my free Primal Power Guide is also in the description below. Here is what I want you to sit with before you close this video. The conventional fitness industry was not built to serve your longevity. It was built to sell you a system of exercises, equipment, supplements, and programming that creates just enough results to keep you coming back, but never quite enough to make you fully independent, fully capable, and fully powerful on your own terms. The barbell deadlift is not inherently evil. It is a tool, but it is a tool that was standardized for competitive powerlifting, adopted wholesale by the general fitness market, and sold to millions of people whose bodies were never designed to specialize in that one narrow movement pattern, with no honest conversation about the long-term cost.
The Gorilla Deadlift is not the only answer, but it is an honest one. It is a movement that respects your anatomy, builds the specific power your body was designed to produce, and compounds over decades rather than quietly eroding them. That is the Silverback Standard. Modern life makes us soft. Primal movement makes us unbreakable. And subscribe. If this conversation opened something for you today, if something landed differently than what you've heard in the gym or in the comment sections, do one thing for me. Share this video with one person you know who has been grinding through that Monday morning stiffness and telling themselves it's just part of the process, because it doesn't have to be. Drop your questions in the comments below. Tell me where you are in your training right now, what your current deadlift situation looks like, and what you want to build. I read every single one. The Primal Power Guide is free in the description. The membership community is there when you're ready to go deeper. I am Dr. Aris Thorne. This is Primal Unleashed, and I'll see you in the next one.